This is the Release and Realization podcast, where we explore emotional freedom and practical manifestation based on the teachings of Lester Levenson and Neville Goddard to help you unlock your inner power and create the life you want. Welcome. In today's episode, David and Anna taught the medical and clinical tests conducted by Harvard University scientists using the Lester Levenson technique.
The modern world is, well, it's just saturated with advice on stress management, isn't it? We see so many approaches, everything from ancient practices to, the latest biofeedback apps.
It's an understandable phenomenon. Stress is universal. And I think everyone is looking for that one reliable technique that really, truly works.
But for the person who really wants to know what's effective, the challenge is always the same. How do you separate what's genuinely working from things that are maybe just expectation or a placebo effect?
Exactly. How do you find the proof?
And that is precisely the core of today's deep dive. We're investigating a specific emotional release method that didn't just collect compelling personal stories. It did something much rarer.
It subjected itself to rigorous, controlled scientific validation at a university level.
Yes. Our mission today is to unpack that data, the data that shows measurable, long-term physiological proof that this method actually works.
We're focusing on the emotional releasing practice developed by an American spiritual teacher named Lester Levenson. Today, you might see it commercialized as the release technique or the Sedona method.
And the validation we're scrutinizing, it comes from medical experiments conducted by two giants in their fields.
That's right. Dr. Richard J. Davison of the State University of New York, who is a renowned stress reduction researcher, and Dr. David C. McClellan from Harvard University, an internationally recognized authority on social dynamics.
That institutional backing is so critical here. It's just extremely uncommon for a highly experiential, internal, emotional method to get this level of objective verification from such prominent academic bodies.
It really is. And to understand the technique, we should probably place it in context by looking at its origins. Lester Levenson's personal story, which, comes before the method, is certainly dramatic.
Absolutely. Levenson is associated with some extraordinary personal claims. He said, for instance, that he achieved complete liberation or enlightenment through this practice he developed.
A huge claim.
A huge claim.
Right. These are certainly highly ambitious personal goals. They demand a radical internal transformation, and they set a very high bar.
So while we have to approach those claims acknowledging their incredible scope, the core of our analysis today is the practical methodology he developed.
The release technique itself, because it offers a specific replicable system for handling stress and emotion.
So regardless of the ultimate destination of enlightenment, the technique itself is designed to be a functional, observable technology for change.
Exactly. The core philosophy is pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Personal change is an experiential process, and it's focused entirely on releasing the underlying negative emotions that constantly drive our unwanted behavior.
Okay.
It's rooted in the belief that all our stress, our dissatisfaction, our inability to perform, it all comes from repressed emotional energy. So the change has to happen at the emotional source, not just at the behavioral symptom.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanism of emotional releasing then, because this is where the system really diverges from what most people instinctively do when they feel something difficult, like, frustration or sadness or fear.
Right. When we experience a difficult emotion, we generally cycle through a few potential responses, but only 3 are really common. The first one, and probably the most damaging, is suppression.
Suppression. So pushing the feeling away, we mask it, we intellectualize it, try to bury it, or just distract ourselves with work or entertainment.
Precisely. And pushing feelings down doesn't eliminate them. It just stores them. This creates a buildup of what you could describe as repressed energy or, emotional baggage.
And that baggage acts as a constant stressor.
It does. It becomes the automatic programming that drives self-sabotaging behaviors, those repeated negative patterns in relationships, and eventually, according to this philosophy, it takes a serious toll on your physical health. You're constantly reacting from the past, not choosing in the present.
Okay, so that's suppression. The second common path, which is often seen as maybe a step up from suppression, is expression.
Right, expression. This involves venting the feeling, shouting, crying, sharing it with someone.
And that can offer some momentary relief, can it?
It can, but often it just reinforces the emotional pattern. If you express anger, for example, you often just solidify the anger, and you could potentially cause damage to your relationships or your environment.
Right. And the third common method, particularly within, say, traditional therapy or self-help circles, is analysis, understanding.
Yes. This involves focusing intensely on the feeling's history. You explore the root cause, you trace the issue back to childhood, or you logically try to reframe the emotion through cognitive techniques.
The belief there being that if you understand it, you can change it.
Correct. The foundational belief is that understanding leads to change. And while understanding is certainly valuable, it can be painstakingly slow when you're dealing with acute emotional energy.
That was Levenson's central critique, wasn't it?
It was. He felt that the intellectual path was, in his words, too slow. The mind might love collecting all this information about how to be happy, but when an intense emotion flares up, when the chips are down,
all that intellectual knowledge just vanishes.
it often does,
Yeah.
and the old reactive pattern just takes over completely.
So if the goal isn't to suppress or just to express or to analyze, what does this practice of releasing actually involve?
It's a radical fourth path. The technique involves 4 simple, direct steps. First, you have to acknowledge and accept that you're feeling the emotion. Let's use anger as an example.
Okay.
You find where it is in your body, and you allow yourself to just feel it without judging it or trying to change it.
Okay, so you're not fighting it.
You're not fighting it.
Yep.
Step 2, you ask yourself a very simple question. Could I let this feeling go?
That's interesting. It immediately frames the feeling as something optional, something that is yours, but it's not you.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that first question will always be yes, because everyone can choose to let go of a feeling, theoretically. The third step involves asking, would I let it go? This is the moment where you engage your own will. This is the choice point where you confront any internal resistance or any perceived, benefit to holding on to the anger.
And then the crucial fourth step.
The fourth step is simply asking when. If the answer to would I is yes, then you just choose now. You consciously drop the attachment to that emotional energy.
This isn't repression, then.
Not at all. It's consciously choosing to release the emotional energy from your system. The release discharges the negative energy entirely. It deals with the stress at its source and eliminates the drive for that behavior.
It sounds almost deceptively simple. And I know that simplicity is one of the things the university researchers later highlighted.
It is.
But for you listening, why would someone choose to hold on to a negative emotion like anger in the first place? What's that perceived benefit you mentioned that we have to confront?
That's where the philosophy of ego-selfishness comes in, which is central to Levenson's teaching. According to this view, all our negative feelings, all stress, it all stems from one of 3 fundamental emotional wants that keep the ego in place.
And what are those?
The need for approval, the need for control, and the need for security, or ACS for short.
ACS. So that's the root cause of the negativity.
Yes. If you feel angry, it's often because your need for control was thwarted or your desire for approval was denied. If you're anxious, it's typically a fear that your security, financial, relational, physical, is threatened.
So these 3 wants create this emotional dependence on things outside of us.
They do. They keep us in a constant state of lack or dissatisfaction. So when you release the anger, you're not just releasing the surface feeling, you're actually releasing the underlying want that created that emotional resistance in the first place.
So when you remove that emotional glue, that underlying want for approval or control, what happens to the patterns of behavior it was driving?
The compulsion to repeat the old patterns just vanishes. The act of releasing leads to an immediate clarity of thinking and an increased sense of choice in the present moment.
You're no longer compelled to react automatically based on all that accumulated baggage from the past.
Exactly. The external world is still messy, but your internal response is now self-determined.
The practical aim then moves beyond just feeling less stressed. It sounds like it's about transforming the internal self, changing that core limiting belief of I can't into a powerful I can or I am state.
That's the ultimate goal. The greater philosophical aim is to transition the individual from a state dominated by this ego-selfishness, the drive for ACS, into a state of what he called loving selflessness.
And this is the path to achieving complete quietude of mind and eventually something called imperturbability.
Imperturbability is a powerful concept. It means more than just being hard to bother.
Right.
It's defined here as an absolute internal stability. It's the ability to exist in the world without being affected emotionally or physiologically by anyone or anything external to you.
Unlimited happiness that isn't dependent on getting what you want or avoiding what you fear.
That's it. Internal freedom. And crucially, this technique emphasizes self-sufficiency. The ability to release is innate and always available. which means you're not dependent on outside authorities, counselors, or gurus.
That sets a profoundly high expectation for the technique. And when claims are this ambitious, ranging from solving daily stress all the way to achieving enlightenment, scientific validation moves from being just helpful to being absolutely necessary.
Absolutely. This is why the Harvard and SUNY studies are so pivotal.
In the world of alternative or emotional therapies, most of the evidence is just anecdotal, isn't it?
It is. So to move beyond that, you need rigorous, controlled scientific testing. And the release technique submitted itself to this very high level of scrutiny to objectively measure its effects on the human body under stress.
So let's transition now to the study design itself. To ensure that scientific rigor, you need independent researchers, and they chose some of the best.
They did. Dr. Richard J. Davidson, who is known for his work linking stress, emotion, and neuroscience, he spearheaded the research at SUNY. And he partnered with Dr. David C. McClelland at Harvard.
Who brought the expertise in social relations and measuring human motivation?
Yes. And their stated purpose was very precise: to evaluate the effectiveness of the release method in reducing stress by measuring quantifiable physiological changes.
And the methodology is so key to filtering out that placebo effect we talked about. So how did they set up the control groups?
They used a very robust, controlled comparison pilot study. It involved 3 distinct groups, each with 20 subjects, which allowed for a clear comparison of the release technique against a true control, and more importantly, against a known, accepted relaxation method.
Okay, that's where the ingenuity of the setup really comes in.
It is.
So let's detail those 3 comparison arms.
The first arm was the Sedona Method Release Technique group. They received training in Lester Levenson's specific method of acknowledging, accepting, and then just releasing the emotional charge.
And the second arm was that vital comparison point.
That was the progressive relaxation group. They were taught the progressive relaxation method, a technique developed way back in 1935, which involves physically tensing and then relaxing specific muscle groups throughout the body.
So that served as a recognized, established, and effective physical baseline.
Exactly. It wasn't just a basic control. It was a strong, proven competitor. They weren't comparing apples to thin air.
And the third arm?
The control group. These subjects expressed interest in stress reduction, but received no training at all during the study period. Their data just provided the standard baseline for any change that might occur naturally over time.
So to measure physiological stress reliably, they couldn't just rely on people's self-reporting. They had to trigger an objective response. What did the researchers use as a standardized stressor?
They needed something acutely stressful but consistent across all the subjects. The primary stressor was a film depicting 3 gory industrial accidents. Yeah. It was deliberately chosen because that kind of visual stimulus is guaranteed to spike fight-or-flight responses, triggering measurable changes in the autonomic nervous system.
That is definitely designed to put the body on high alert. Were there other stressors used to ensure it was a comprehensive challenge?
Yes. To make sure the effects weren't just unique to watching something, subjects were also exposed to challenges that required them to generate stress internally.
Okay.
This included self-generation of emotional imagery tied to a deeply negative past event and a word association exercise with sensitive themes like death, violence, and sex. This multi-pronged approach confirmed that the technique worked against stress generated both internally and externally.
So they had the stressor. How did they schedule the measurements to confirm not just immediate relief, but lasting change?
The measurements were taken at 3 specific, strategically important time points. First, they established a baseline before any training began.
Okay, the starting point.
Right. Second, they measured 2 weeks post-training to check for immediate efficacy in, integration of the technique. And third, they measured again 3.5 months post-training.
And that 3.5-month follow-up, that's the crucial data point, isn't it? It tests the durability of the change.
That's what it's all about. We need a technique that offers true, lasting resilience, not just a temporary fix you get from attending a seminar.
Precisely. So the core physiological markers they measured were heart rate, muscle tension, and very significantly, blood pressure, with its specific focus on the diastolic component.
Yes.
Okay, now we get to the hard quantitative data. Let's look at the heart rate results, focusing on that final measurement point, the third viewing of that stressful film, month after the training was done. This tells us which method instilled the most lasting resilience.
We can start with the control group. The individuals who received no training, they showed only a minimal reduction in their heart rate response. It was about a 5% decrease compared to their first baseline viewing.
So their bodies were largely reacting the same way to the same stimulus months later.
Pretty much, yes.
The progressive relaxation group, our established physically focused control, performed better, which you'd expect.
Correct. They achieved a 10% reduction in heart rate. And this confirms the validity of progressive relaxation as an effective way to physically calm the body.
But the release technique group, they delivered a result that more than doubled that established physical method.
They did. They achieved a remarkable 23% reduction in heart rate during that final stressor viewing.
Wow. And when you look at the comparative improvement ratios, the results are, well, they're staggering. They really demonstrate the efficacy of this internal approach.
They are. Progressive relaxation, when you compare it to the control group's minimal change, showed a 100% improvement. In other words, it doubled the non-specific effect.
Okay. But the release technique group?
The release technique group showed a massive 360% improvement over the control group's performance.
360%.
Yes. That ratio is a powerful indicator that the technique is tapping into a mechanism far beyond standard suggestion or expectation. It suggests a fundamental shift in how the subject's autonomic nervous systems responded to perceived danger.
Let's move on to the second key physiological marker, blood pressure, specifically the diastolic reading. For the audience, can you clarify why the diastolic component is often considered more significant than the systolic reading when you're measuring chronic stress?
This is a critical point, and it links back directly to the mechanism of releasing. Systolic pressure measures the pressure when the heart is actively beating, pushing blood out.
That's the top number.
That's the top number. Diastolic pressure, the bottom number, measures the pressure when the heart is at rest, relaxed, and refilling between beats.
So a high diastolic reading indicates a chronic underlying tension even when the heart isn't actively working hard.
Exactly. It reflects the baseline tension in the arterial walls, which is often tied to that constant low-level activation of the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight response. Reducing diastolic pressure is a powerful sign that the person is achieving a deep, fundamental physical relaxation.
Not just surface calmness.
Not at all.
So looking at the final measurement 3.5 months later, compared to that pre-training baseline, the control group showed a surprising and, frankly, a concerning trend.
They did. They registered a 2% increase in their diastolic blood pressure.
An increase?
Yes. This suggests that repeated exposure to stress, even in a controlled lab environment, without an effective coping mechanism, can actually lead to cumulative negative reactivity. They were less able to handle the pressure than when they started.
Wow. Okay, what about the progressive relaxation group?
They achieved a minimal but positive outcome. They showed a 3% reduction in diastolic blood pressure. A beneficial sign, but clearly not enough to counteract persistent, deep-seated stress.
And then we see the results of the release technique group.
They demonstrated a substantial 23% reduction in diastolic blood pressure.
23%.
Yes. This is a dramatic physiological indicator. It shows that the internal mental practice was able to dissolve chronic, systemic tension that physical relaxation alone just didn't touch. It led to a much healthier baseline state.
It's fascinating that a purely cognitive and emotional technique can produce such a profound, measurable physical change in the cardiovascular system.
It speaks volumes to the theory that emotional suppression is the primary driver of physical illness and stress. If you remove the emotional energy that's causing constriction, the body just relaxes naturally.
Let's consider the third measurement, muscle tension. This is an interesting comparison because progressive relaxation is a technique specifically designed to target and reduce muscle tension through physical action.
Right. You would logically expect it to win this category hands down.
So this is the perfect test of whether a mental technique can rival a physical one in the physical domain.
It is. During that third viewing of the stressful film, the control group showed a small, natural reduction in muscle tension, about 14%.
Okay. And the progressive relaxation group, the dedicated muscle technique?
They performed strongly, showing a 28% reduction.
Which is solid evidence for the effectiveness of tensing and relaxing.
It is. However, the purely mental release technique group achieved a reduction that was almost identical. They came in at a 26% reduction in muscle tension.
So the mental practice achieved nearly the same physical reduction as the technique whose entire focus is the physical reduction of tension.
Yes, it confirms that the emotional release inherently translates into physical relief.
So the researchers, observing this comprehensive data across heart rate, blood pressure, and muscle tension, they came to a definitive conclusion about the overall efficacy of the release technique.
It did. They concluded that the release technique, or Sedona method, is an outstanding technique.
Yeah.
And they based this strong scientific finding on 4 specific qualities they observed during the study.
What were those 4 qualities?
The first was its simplicity. It's just easy to learn and apply. Second was its efficiency. It delivers results quickly. Third, the absence of questionable concepts. The practice is direct and experiential. It's not reliant on mystical or complex theories.
And the 4th?
The rapidity of observable, measurable results.
The physiological data, particularly that superior long-term reduction in heart rate and diastolic blood pressure, provided the objective evidence needed to support those claims of simplicity and efficiency. It really proves the link between an internal subjective change and objective bodily function. Now we have to address that critical question of durability. The study already measured at 3.5 months, but do these benefits persist or do they even improve beyond that initial period?
The idea that psychological or emotional progress can be cumulative, where the benefits actually accelerate over time, is incredibly appealing.
And the longitudinal view confirmed this. The researchers noted that the positive results actually got even better with time.
Right. This suggested that the more frequently the technique was applied, the more stable the autonomic nervous system became. You're building a deep reservoir of resilience. The cumulative benefit is key.
This concept of cumulative benefit was mirrored in a fascinating real-world application study conducted outside the lab environment.
The MONY Corporation sales study. This moved the testing into a high-stress, performance-based domain.
This study evaluated the effect of the method on sales performance among field underwriters at the Mutual of New York, or MONY Corporation. This is an environment where performance is highly measurable and stress from rejection from deadlines is constant.
And they used a very sound study design to make sure the results weren't skewed. The trained group was meticulously matched with a control group based on critical performance variables like age, sex, tenure with the company, and, importantly, their previous production history.
And the result was unambiguous.
It was. The group trained in the emotional release method outperformed the control group by a margin of 33% in sales production over the testing period.
33%. That translates directly into increased income and productivity, all driven by an internal emotional shift.
It does.
I'm curious about the mechanism behind that sales jump. We saw the cumulative physiological improvement. How did that translate into a 33% increase in real-world performance?
Well, we can speculate. Sales often rely heavily on persistence, on rapport, and on overcoming the fear of rejection.
Right.
So if a person releases their underlying fear of failure or their deep-seated need for approval, that ACS we talked about, they become more resilient to cold calls, to client indifference, to market dips. They stop reacting personally to rejection.
So if they're able to release the negative charge of the no, they can just immediately move on to the next opportunity without being dragged down by self-doubt or performance anxiety.
And that would naturally lead to greater consistency and a higher volume of contacts.
That increased consistency is the key. And the crucial finding in the MONY study reinforces this idea of cumulative benefit.
It does. The margin of superiority for the trained group was actually greater in the second half of the test period than it was in the first.
That is powerful evidence. It shows the benefits are not just a quick burst of motivation, but a compounding effect. The more they released, the more that freedom from emotional drag translated into sustained higher output.
And beyond the objective physiological markers and the tangible financial gains, we also have extensive subjective data from graduate surveys.
Which provides the essential real-world context, showing how these internal changes actually manifested in the daily lives of practitioners months later.
2 comprehensive surveys were conducted between 9 and 10.5 months after participants had completed the course, involving over 100 graduates. So that gives us a strong indication of perceived long-term value.
And the satisfaction levels were exceptionally high.
They were. 91% to 92% of participants rated the course as valuable, very valuable, or extremely valuable. And the most frequently cited rating was extremely valuable, which shows a deep conviction in the method's lasting impact.
And a very remarkable data point. Not a single person across either survey gave the course a negative rating.
That's incredible. It suggests a very low rate of dropout or disappointment among those who continue to apply the technique.
The surveys also detailed specific areas of life where participants saw massive improvements, directly linking the mental technique to measurable life shifts.
For instance, 89% reported a significant improvement in their reaction to stressful situations. This correlation between feeling calmer and the objective physiological data we just reviewed, the lower heart rate and blood pressure, seems exceptionally well-founded.
Let's review some of the other categories of improvement as they show a systemic change across both personal and professional life.
Well, we saw massive improvements in interpersonal dynamics. 80% reported improved relationships with people. This speaks directly to that core principle of letting go of the need for approval and control, which typically sabotage our interactions.
When you stop needing people to behave a certain way, relationships naturally improve.
They do. The ability to relax and the overall feeling of well-being also saw significant gains, with 78% and 76% improvement respectively. That subjective feeling of resilience aligns perfectly with the objective drop in diastolic blood pressure.
And anxiety levels dropped for 76% of graduates. The professional impact was also notable. 63% reported improved job performance.
Which, when you combine it with the MONY study results, paints a very clear picture of inner emotional mastery translating into external achievement.
And even physical metrics were reported. 51% reported improved energy levels. This makes perfect sense if you consider that suppressing negative emotions is just an enormous energy drain on the physical system.
And beyond that, 35% reported improvement in the quality of their sleep and a lessening of undesirable habits, like smoking or drinking.
This supports the idea that once the negative emotional charge that drives addiction or avoidance is discharged, the system naturally seeks a healthier balance.
It goes beyond just subjective relief, though. People reported tangible health gains that doctors struggled to explain.
Let's delve deeper into that powerful anecdote connecting emotional stress and chronic physical illness. It's quite striking.
It's one of the most striking reports. It really highlights the profound connection between reducing internal stress and physical healing. The case involved a patient who was scheduled for surgery for a cluster of serious conditions: diverticulitis, gout, and severe hypoglycemia.
And these are conditions heavily linked to systemic inflammation and stress.
They are. A major surgical intervention was imminent. But then the patient started applying the emotional release technique.
And what happened?
The patient began to use the emotional releasing method diligently. And within a matter of days, the surgical condition just disappeared. The other physical problems, the gout and hypoglycemia, also cleared up. Medical professionals were reportedly shocked by the rapid disappearance of conditions that were set to require invasive treatment.
And the only variable that changed was the conscious removal of deep, long-standing emotional stress.
That was it. It suggests that the body's natural healing mechanisms, when they're not constantly fighting a repressed emotional load, can resolve serious physical issues very, very quickly. The conclusion was that the results were directly attributed to the drastic reduction of systemic stress.
And linking back to the MONY study, we also see these reported financial benefits, which can often seem counterintuitive for an emotional practice.
Well, financial stress is almost always rooted in deep emotional blocks. Blocks related to lack, scarcity, or that need for security, one of the three ACS wants.
Right.
So when people release these core emotional and mental blocks, they often report unexpected financial gains, significant increases in sales or stock values, or unexpected windfalls. The implication is that releasing that internal resistance to abundance allows external opportunities to be perceived and acted upon more easily.
It's the removal of the mental barrier to success, whether that success is financial or emotional.
And this transformation also enhances the ability to handle everyday charged feelings. Graduates report easily letting go of things like fear, phobias, anxiety, and panic attacks, often in the moment they arise.
Self-doubt melts away.
It does. And they find it easier to connect with people because they no longer project their own needs for approval onto others. This is the practical definition of achieving that quietude of mind and imperturbability we talked about earlier.
Okay, so if the technique is so demonstrably effective, and the results are so outstanding, 360% superior in heart rate reduction, why wouldn't everyone who tries it maintain these incredible gains?
That brings us back to the crucial philosophical concept of momentum. The effectiveness of the technique is directly proportional to its consistent, committed application. The people who report these massive, amazing gains are those who have developed momentum.
So you can't be a closet releaser, someone who only pulls out the technique when they're already in a crisis or a deep jam.
Exactly. Momentum is built by using the technique continuously, even when things are going well, discharging the small background irritations and frustrations. This practice is what maintains the internal environment of happiness and lightness.
If you only release when you're in a crisis, you're always playing catch-up. You miss out on this compounding benefits we saw in the long-term data.
You do. And that momentum is powered by commitment.
Commitment.
It's a foundational decision, deciding to be the best releaser one can be. It involves being willing to extend oneself, to prioritize internal freedom, and to go the extra distance to achieve goals. Advanced instruction often stresses this focus, deciding not to let anything stand in the way of that ultimate state of unlimited happiness.
So the commitment is the mechanism that translates the deceptively simple act of letting go into a powerful, sustained, life-transforming technology. It moves the technique from a temporary coping mechanism into a constant state of being.
And the research, spanning from SUNY and Harvard, confirms that this commitment yields ongoing, compounding returns, reflected both subjectively in heightened well-being and objectively in stable, reduced physiological health markers like heart rate and diastolic blood pressure.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, let's revisit why this specific university validation matters so profoundly to the informed learner, to you listening.
It matters because of the rigorous comparison. We know the placebo effect is real and very powerful. Studies confirm that nonspecific therapeutic effects, where belief alone causes healing, can be significant, especially when stress is involved.
When you believe something will work, that expectation can indeed activate the body's own healing mechanisms.
Absolutely. But the study design filtered this out by using a robust comparison group. The release technique wasn't just compared to people doing nothing.
Right. It was compared against progressive relaxation, a widely accepted method that already carries a significant therapeutic benefit and positive expectation.
That is the key differentiator. By showing the release technique delivered a 360% improvement over the control group in heart rate reduction versus progressive relaxation's 100% improvement, the researchers provided compelling evidence that the technique is using a specific, highly efficient mechanism, the direct discharge of emotional energy.
And that provides superior, measurable results beyond mere expectation or suggestion.
Which places Lester Levenson's emotional release method in a very small, very select category of emotional therapies, whose effectiveness has been robustly proven by objective medical studies.
It fundamentally suggests that the approach targets the internal, energetic cause of distress, our resistance and emotional reactions, and that leads to systemic physical stability.
The ability to easily eliminate negativity on the spot leaves you in a clear, positive position to execute on your goals and create the life you desire. The research validates the philosophical claim. This simple practice is a practical technology for lasting, positive change.
So if the hard data shows that simply choosing to let go of an emotion, letting go of a core want like approval or security, can so dramatically and measurably improve your physical response to acute stress, lowering your blood pressure and calming your heart, what limiting emotion could you choose to release today to fundamentally shift your reality and experience greater well-being? The capacity to choose your emotional state, now supported by physiological science, might truly be the most powerful self-care practice available.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, please consider subscribing to the channel. For more in-depth and advanced content, you're welcome to join us on Patreon. We'll be back next week with the continuation of this topic.